Hello, and welcome to Weekend Wisdom. This is a podcast created by creatingafamily.org, and I am your host, Tracy Whitney. I'm a content manager at creatingafamily.org, and I am also the new host for both of the Creating a Family podcasts. I'm so glad that you joined me today. Weekend Wisdom is an opportunity to ask us questions that are obstacles or concerns or challenges for you and your family, things that might concern you about the process or about challenging behaviors or things like that. And we want you to send us your questions so that we can comb through our archives and get some expert-based information and support for you. We kind of put together our personal experiences as well as, again, those expert opinions that we've gotten from podcasts over the years, put them all together, and hopefully we create an answer that will help you strengthen your family. So if you have questions about any aspect of adoption, foster care, or kinship care, which is also called relative caregiving, like grandparents raising grandkids or aunts and uncles raising nieces and nephews, please send us your questions at info@creatingafamily.org, and we will do our best to create an answer that will strengthen and support you and your family. Today's question comes from a family who is heading down the foster to adopt path, and they have a question about photo listings. So let's jump into it. Hello, we are currently going through our home study to adopt from foster care, and I'm wondering if it's too early for me to be looking at photo listings. I have been looking at photo listings already for a long time, but now when I read the bios of these children, it feels really real, and I'm starting to feel slightly attached. I'm curious if you think this is setting myself up for disappointment. So, listener, I am so on board with you about this. I understand it. We had a similar situation when we were waiting for our second international adoption. I was looking at the advocacy files and feeling this kind of high level of hope and readiness that just, kind of pierced my heart every time I saw one of those faces that caught my attention. So I get it. Your heart is being tugged by these kids' stories. And it can, on one hand, like I said, feel very hopeful. And on the other hand, you're looking at the length of the process that you're in, and it can feel frustrating. So yes, reading their bios makes this process feel really real. And you have like this sense of urgency when one or two kids catch your eye or when one story just really pierces your heart. It's natural to feel that. It's natural to feel as if some sort of attachment is already stirring inside of you, even if it is only through a screen. And to me, that shows that you are ready and your heart is ready to welcome a child, and you're doing the things that are necessary to prepare yourself and your family for this big adjustment. Here's a few thoughts that I have about the photo listings, but more kind of about the waiting game that you're in. I know this waiting period is weird and awkward and feels on one hand like it's going to take forever, and on the other hand feels like it's flying by and you're just trying to catch your breath. So I hope that some of these ideas that I share today kind of help you sort through the questions that you have and kind of the things that are going on underneath that might be prompting those questions, to find the right path forward through this waiting game for your family. So the first one is, number one, please remember to be patient. It is so hard, and I understand how hard it is to wait, but it's also important to kind of hold on to patience as a virtue that you want to maintain through this process. When you feel anxious, it can lead to rushing and acts of desperation, and we don't want you to say yes out of desperation or say yes to a child's file out of anxiety. So try to just hold on to the patience. It's also really important while you're being patient to remember to be present in your life right now, whether that's patience with the process and present for the process, taking in all the parts of the process and what they mean for you and for your family. But also, if you have other children in the home already, it's really important that you maintain an intentional presence in the everyday moments of your life right now. Maintain routine for yourselves. Stay in touch with your friends and family. Enjoy these days, whether you have children in the home or not already. Enjoy these days where you have different responsibilities and activity levels and kind of like that emotional or mental labor going on. Because when you bring a child home, all of that will change. And change is hard. Change requires patience. So start training yourself now for that patience mentality, just kind of hanging in there and persevering. Another thing that you can do while you're waiting is to check with your caseworker and see what the current timelines in your state or in your county are looking like. Is your timeline matching up with kind of the average or the typical timelines in your county or in your state? It's pretty common for adoption from foster care to take up to 3-ish or more years from starting your home study to finalization of the adoption. That timeline will depend on factors of the child's unique case, factors of the child's birth parents' case, whether or not the child is legally free at placement, or if they're moving quickly towards becoming legally free. How quickly that child's case moves through the whole process is one of the big factors that will impact how long it takes for finalization of adoption to happen. The third thing is that your caseworker should have already been able to give you information about how long you can expect to wait in your particular county or in your particular state from the home study to finalization, but recognize that you have some control over that in the fact that you can adjust your profile based on what you think you and your partner or your spouse can handle, what kind of child you think you can parent. So that includes age, that includes special needs that the child might have, that includes learning challenges that the child might have in their file. And so your openness of your profile will also be another factor that you can work through with your caseworker to help determine what your timeline will be. I know I'm saying a lot about caseworkers here, but the other thing that you can do, the next thing that you can try, is to talk to your caseworker about making sure that they're only focusing on children who are already legally free for placement, for adoption, when they are placed in your home. You're going to have to advocate for yourself in this area because the need for placing children in safe homes is so significant. You're going to have to advocate for yourself with your caseworker to just remember, we want to only consider children who are legally free for adoption. That means that their parental rights have already been terminated, and you're going to review those files first. Those are your priority. If your state allows it, specify that you will only consider placement of kids with that finalization of parental rights or that termination of parental rights, kids that have that primary goal of permanency through adoption. One note here that is good for you to remember is that in many parts of the country, the language of foster to adopt is being phased out in favor of language like pre-adoptive placement or simply adoption. Just make sure that you're talking regularly with your caseworker about these matters and educating yourself about your county, your state, and whatever agency you might be working with if you're also working with a private agency. If you haven't already expanded your list of the type of child you might feel ready to parent, you should consider that. If you have a partner or a spouse, make sure you're talking with them and you're all on the same page about this. But you need to make sure you're being very honest and self-reflective about your strengths and the supports that you can access, the resources you can provide, and what you feel equipped to handle regarding age, history of behaviors, medical history, developmental needs, learning challenges, sibling groups or not a sibling group, etc. All the things. A practical way to work through those questions is to have a conversation. Again, if you have a partner or a spouse, with your caseworker, the three of you together, have a conversation where your caseworker might share a few kind of anonymous cases or case examples with you to talk about how parenting the child represented in that particular file might play out on the everyday. So it's kind of like a role playing or a what if scenario that you're working out with your caseworker. And they should feel free, and you need to give them permission to feel free to ask you hard questions about what you can handle. And so that might help you get a better understanding of how the process works, what you can handle, and then how that impacts your timeline. Keep in mind that these photo listings are not and cannot possibly be the most current representation of who is in the foster system right now waiting for a permanent placement that moves towards adoption. So here's what I mean. Nationally, around 108-ish thousand children in foster care are legally free and waiting for adoption. And that's from the data of fiscal year 2022. You can find more information about these numbers on our website, and I'll link in the show notes to help you find the right resource for that. But that means that only a very small fraction of these kids, those 108,000, will ever appear on photo listing platforms. That is about, well, it's well less than 5%, I'll say that, of all the legally free children who are visible. So the photo listings are kind of just a skinny slice of the pie, so to speak. It's entirely likely that the child who lands in your home that you've said yes to will not ever have appeared on one of those state photo listings. So hopefully that kind of makes you feel hopeful and a little less overwhelmed by what you are seeing on the website, because there's so many more children available than you will ever see on a photo listing. In the meantime, you should consider how to emotionally and practically prepare yourself for viewing profiles that your caseworker offers you. How do you think you would handle it if you get a profile, you read, you say yes to the child represented in that file, and then that match falls through? It's likely that you're going to feel disappointed. And so you have to figure out how to work through that disappointment and use it as a growth point towards resilience for parenting a child that comes to your home in the long run. If you have kids in your home already, consider their ages, their abilities to understand the timelines and the vague concept of this file represents a child who needs a home, and the vague understanding of timelines from here's the file that we reviewed and we think we might say yes to this child versus that child moving into your home. The kids in your home may have very different understandings of all of that and of the process. So work as a family, you, your partner, your spouse, the children already in your home, work as a family to talk through those things and kind of really put in language everyone can understand what's happening, when it's likely to happen, and how the process plays out. You should be focusing on building up your ability to process disappointment, your resilience when you do face the disappointment, and how to be patient all along the way. These are things that you can be doing with each other to shore up each other's ability to handle the many unknowns that happen in this process along the way. So figure out what your boundaries are, what your parameters are, what you can handle, and then be really clear and consistent in enforcing them. There is a significant need for safe, stable homes for all the kids involved in the foster system across the United States, whether they fit your profile or not. So your caseworker may just keep presenting files to you because their need is so great, but you should be mindful of your own boundaries and your own limits and try not to push yourself out of those boundaries out of a sense of desperation or impatience. If you're kind of going outside of your boundaries because you've rethought your abilities and you've rethought your parameters, that's fine. And prepare yourself well for that. Ask your caseworker to help you get educated about that. But if you are doing it out of a sense of desperation or anxiety or impatience, check yourself and be very cautious and very careful about that. If the wait continues to feel really long, examine those parameters again. When you find a profile that impacts you online, feel free to reach out to your caseworker once you've been, kind of set free to accept a placement. But remember, again, that those profiles online are just a very small slice of the really big pie of kids that are available to be placed in homes. Finally, do everything you can to educate yourself and keep educating yourself. This includes keeping your home study current. This includes keeping all of your other related documentation current, and then educating yourself, ongoing education about the needs and the parameters that you've set for a potential profile that you could accept. Learn and keep learning. That's kind of our motto here at Creating a Family. We believe that knowledge is power. And so we want you to keep those goals ahead of yourself of patience and, flexibility and nimbleness and consistency and learning and keep learning, all of those things that we've talked about today. If you can keep these tips in mind while you're reviewing the photo listings, and you can proceed with a clear understanding of what these photo listings mean and what your process is, then I think it's okay to keep looking at the photo listings. I don't think it's too soon. But if you feel like looking at these photo listings is creating anxiety or impatience or desperation, I would encourage you to take a step back and think about the things that we've talked about in this conversation today. Just keep working on building your readiness, building your foundation firm and sure and strong. It is a huge leap of faith to put yourself and your family building into the hands of the foster system. I get that. But if you can trust the process and trust yourself and your sense of self in the process, it will happen for you, and you will be able to build your family through adoption. In the meantime, lean into your personal strengths, your relationship strengths, focus on realistic flexibility and working closely with your caseworker to keep yourself moving forward. You've got this. It's an exciting journey to be on. It's a huge learning curve. And if you can remember that your home study is much more than just paperwork, it's a foundational part of the process that helps you get ready for whatever child eventually comes to your home, then I think you're setting yourself up for success, whether you view the photo listings regularly or not. So to answer your question, it's not too soon and if you can kind of keep all those things in mind while you're doing the viewing of the photo listings, then I think you're probably in pretty good shape. Listeners, if you liked what you heard today and it helped you in any way, please leave us a rating or a review to let us know. We do read all of your reviews. We share comments from our listeners with each other on the staff to encourage each other and to build each other up and to keep us all fueled for doing the work that we're doing here at Creating a Family. We hope that you will come back next week and listen again and tell a friend about Weekend Wisdom and what you've learned from listening to today's episode or any of the previous episodes that you've heard. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.